I'm sure many of you have already heard about Dave Rubin's Surrounded appearance, and specifically how badly it went for him. For those who haven't had a chance to watch it, let me phrase it like this. In my video explaining why I dislike Surrounded as a show, I made note that many of the people invited on don't really do a good job constructing claims that lead to interesting political conversation. I specifically highlighted Mehdi Hassan, Sam Cedar, and Michael Knowles as all having at least one claim in their episode that it didn't really make much sense to argue over with the crowd they were in. Rubin, to his credit, doesn't fall into that trap. Instead, his claims feel incredibly malleable, truth be told. Here are the clips of him introducing them for point of reference.
My first Surrounded claim is that wokeism did more damage to America than Trump ever did. My next Surrounded claim is if you still vote for Democrats in 2026, you're voting for broken cities, broken schools, and broken borders. My next Surrounded claim is that progressives push normal, moderate Americans to the right. My final Surrounded claim is that the modern left cares more about ideology than reality.
Rubin has very much stacked the deck in his favor here, as these claims are so vague they can essentially mean whatever Rubin wants. Even if somebody does convince him, for example, that Donald Trump has done a lot of damage, he could simply say that he thinks the damage wokeism has done is worse. I mean, he hasn't exactly given a metric for what damage entails, so it could literally just mean whatever he wants it to. When Rubin says voting for Democrats in 2026 means broken cities, broken schools, and broken borders, well, first off, we all have to argue over what specifically he thinks a non-broken version of all those things look like. But also, it's worth noting he specifically says doing such this year will result in that. Why specifically now? Why not, say, last year, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago? And when he says voting for Democrats, well, I assume he means all Democrats. Has the entirety of the DNC been captured by the people creating this to the point where nobody who disagrees with the policies causing these problems is even allowed in the party anymore? When did that happen? And why? And who did it? Is he just referring to voting for the average Democrat? Well, if so, what's his basis for what counts as such? Rubin specifically notes school choice as an example of a policy he thinks would do very good at fixing modern education.
What I would say my basic situation when it comes to education is we should have school choice. We should have charter schools, we should have public schools, we should have private schools. You shouldn't necessarily be stuck in a failing school just because of your zip code.
I'm glad you brought this up.
want to have as much choice as possible within the system. And then it also creates competition. I also, look, we have a huge
I'm
homeschool.
sorry, I gotta cut you off.
We have
Private
a huge
and charter
homeschool
schools
boom.
are not more inclusive.
But Democrats exist who are in favor of school choice. The organization Democrats for Education Reform is specifically made up of such people. They even, on their website, have a list of Democrats they endorse that people could vote for who agree with Rubin's vision on education. It's also more than a little humorous that Rubin mentioned charter schools, given a Democrat, that being Barack Obama, was very important when it came to their expansion in recent years. To quote from a 2016 Washington Post article, Obama did touch on graduation rates during a speech he gave around this time, touting the newly announced highest ever national high school graduation rate of 83%. He noted that DC's graduation rate grew faster than any other place in the country this past year. He didn't say that fastest growing designation would include DC charter schools in the mix with traditional public schools, perhaps because he didn't mention charter schools at all. Why is that strange in a speech dedicated to talking up his education legacy? Because the growth of charter schools was a key priority in his administration's overall school reform program. Promising to promote the expansion of charter schools was one of the ways that states could win some of the money in Obama's signature $4.3 billion Race to the Top funding competition. today, 6% of U.S. public school students attend charter schools, up from about 3% when he took office in 2009. It was 2% in 2004, and he was standing in a city that has one of the most successful charter school sectors in the country. When Joe Biden tried to place greater restrictions on charter schools, many Democrats vocally criticized the idea. Here's a New York Times article discussing it from when this was all happening. The rally, discussing a protest against this proposal, came on the heels of several high-profile denouncements of the proposed rules, including opinion pieces by Michael R. Bloomberg, the philanthropist, billionaire, and former New York mayor, and Governor Jared Polis of Colorado, a Democrat. In a letter sent last week, Senators Dianne Feinstein of California, Cory Booker of New Jersey, and Michael Bennet of Colorado joined Republicans in asking the department to revise them. Progressives move average Americans to the right? Does he mean they are literally accidentally causing people to agree with the right more? That progressives move the Overton window so far to the left that what was previously the center is now right of center? Or that average people are allying with the right because they think the left has just gone too damn far? All of those have very different implications. And when he mentions the modern left engaging in reality denial, okay, what specific aspect of reality does he think they're denying because of their ideology? So how did Rubin fail at doing this? Well, to put it simply, he said a bunch of nonsense. From discussing how we shouldn't trust these random inspectors at the IAEA.
Here, and by the way, Donald Trump and every president for the last 40 years has said that Iran will not get a nuclear bomb, right? Every president has said that. Joe Biden said no. Remember, Kamala Harris said no or
the JCPOA
don't, right?
limited it to a greater extent. Okay. Why didn't you address that point?
Again, you are going on the assumption that you can trust these random inspectors that are going into these places.
IAEA?
Literally,
yeah. Random inspectors?
All right.
The IAEA is the International Atomic Energy.
With all due respect, I think that trusting some of these international things that they somehow have America's interests or the West's interests in mind, I think is a kind of faulty, it's just a faulty premise, I would say.
So the international actors that are lying.
Which I think Sam Cedar had the best response to.
Yeah, random inspectors. The IAEA is the International Atomic Energy.
My name's Carl. I'm here to do the inspection.
I got the inspection lotto. I guess I'm supposed to follow these instructions here.
Sorry, I'm late. Parking was a bitch. Got the job on Craigslist.
I got a checklist I gotta run through here. You guys,
$28 an hour. All you gotta do is get on a plane, get over there. Are you kidding? No, you guys aren't enriching urine, are you?
What percentages? What does it say? Stock.
And why doesn't he trust those international agencies outside of some vague notion of them not having the West's best interest at heart? Given the IAEA has been accused of being biased against Iran and in favor of Western nations? I don't know. Why does he think this? I also don't know. He never explains it. Also, while talking to this person, he mentions that both the Dow Jones and S&P 500 are up under Trump.
Can you tell me anything that he's done to make it better off? You say it's broken for Democrats. It sounds like it's broken right now under Trump.
Have you looked at the stock market?
It's worse off in terms of growth in 2025 as compared to 2024. If you look at Dow Jones and S&P 500.
They're both up quite a bit right now.
But lower growth rate.
Well.
Even though they both tend to go up in general. That's how investment markets work. People invest and it typically succeeds, and if it doesn't, they stop investing in those specific companies. I'm simplifying a lot, obviously, however, that's a basic understanding of why this is utter nonsense. What you actually want to be looking at is the rate at which each of these grew, which, by the way, as this person points out, and the Jubilee fact check admits, was higher under Biden than Trump. Jubilee's fact-checking, by the way, also notes Dave getting two other things wrong during this part of the video, specifically in reference to Canada having this incredibly high cheese tariff, along with him falsely saying countries have completely removed tariffs because of Donald Trump implementing them on said nations.
What better deal did he get?
What?
What better deal did he get?
What do you mean? Several countries have already come back, and
Name any of the conditions that made the trade better off. Give me the specifics.
Canada, I think they had something like a 60% tariff on cheese, literally on cheese, that was being sold from America, from Wisconsin to Canada, and that basically is zero right now. That's one
Basically, so what
little
is it?
example. I think it's zero right now.
Okay, so
I think
that's
it's
a
zero
targeted
right
tariff,
now.
not a universal tariff.
Yeah.
Can you name one country that had a universal tariff on us?
I think there are several countries that
Name
did.
one.
I think there are several countries
Name
that
one.
did. Honestly, I'm not sure, but I think there are several countries that did.
Okay, so why are we placing
that
universal- so then why don't we
zeroed
place
out
it-
the tariffs.
so then why don't we
I think
place-
Argentina did, if I'm not mistaken. I think Israel did. I think a few other countries did.
Why don't we put a proportional tariff
Yeah.
on them, the same that they put on us, so that we can negotiate that down? It doesn't
Well,
seem like Trump's looking for that.
what do you mean?
Trump's-
That's
Trump's-
that's
hold
exactly
on,
what
and
Trump
again,
did.
Let me just clarify. The tariffs are being paid by our consumers. So Trump, while trying to get his deals, is making inflation go up and making it worse off for you at the grocery store, worse off for you at the gas pump, worse off
do
for
you think
you
we should
when you're
just-
trying to buy a house.
yeah.
So can you, again,
And just after that, we see
Well, right now, Iran literally exports no oil. Every day, they are losing $500 million. So what you can do over time is you have a military adventure, which we had 40 days, which we took out their Air Force and their entire Navy and everything else. And now we completely control their
none of those were
economy.
concerned. What's
And
the political concession since the beginning of the war?
What's the political concession
Yes.
from Iran since
Yes.
the beginning of the war?
Yes, name one.
Yeah, Jubilee's fact-checking will just sometimes admit what Dave Rubin's saying doesn't make any sense. To his bizarre attempt to argue with somebody that says the rich need to pay more in taxes using absolutely nonsensical statistics, Jubilee notes that his numbers are totally off, by the way, but I actually want to go a little deeper.
The majority of the wealth in this system
Yeah.
is owned by 1% of the population. You understand
Yeah,
that, right?
and-
And where does that wealth come from?
Wait, 1% of the population. Do you know how much percent they pay in taxes? That 1%?
Not nearly enough, because
so
the
what would
majority of
be-
their
all right, so it's
majority of their wealth
47%.
comes from.
It's 47%.
right.
Hold on. So 1% of the population pay 47%. You accept that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would be their
And
fair
what
share?
percent of that
What would be their fair
is their
share?
actual wealth that they own? That again, majority of these lineages of,
Well, you
of
seem to-
power and
wait, hold on.
ownership
What would be
date
their fair
back
share?
to
What would be their
first
fair share?
accumulation of.
What would be their fair share?
I would say that.
Well, how much wealth do they have exactly? Because anything short of an actively regressive tax is going to make it so those who have the most money pay the most taxes. For point of reference, imagine taxing somebody with $10,000 at 10%. He would pay $1,000 in taxes. Compare that to doing the same with somebody who has $100,000. He'd pay $10,000 in taxes. He's paying 10 times more because he has more money. The whole damn video is on this level. Here's Rubin discussing his friendship with Michael Knowles despite the fact Knowles believes his legal rights should be rolled back.
Yeah, for me, I just feel like that type of annoyance that wokeism presents to the world is a lot less dangerous than I don't know, the coalition that you're a part of that condemns people for having children when they're in gay marriages, or says things like, people that are of particular sexual orientations don't deserve the same equal rights.
Well,
Would you say that that's something that's dangerous?
A coalition is going to have all sorts of people in it. So
it's like
MAGA, if we were talking
ideological
about
diversity,
yeah,
right?
if we were talking about what MAGA is, what I like about MAGA actually is that it's not a specific set of you have to believe this exact set, right?
Right.
You have to believe
so
these exact
some people in MAGA can
things.
believe
Except there are beliefs you need to hold in order to be part of MAGA. For example, you can't be a part of it and also believe that MAGA is bad. Even if it's something that bare bones, all political movements inherently require some amount of agreed upon beliefs in order to exist in the first place. Otherwise, how would you form a movement around anything? And by the way, if there really are no centralized beliefs that are core to MAGA, then how could you defend MAGA as a concept to anybody, Dave? What would you be defending if not the political beliefs held by the members?
gay couples can have kids, and others can believe like that's degeneracy and those people need to be jailed.
Well,
those are like the difference of ideas. That we're
well,
talking
actually,
about?
the tough answer to that is yes.
Oh.
As long as you're not trying to litigate someone's life. I am around a lot of conservatives all the time, and
Right.
particularly Christian conservatives, let's say, they generally are not for gay marriage. By the way, there's not one mosque in the United States that performs gay marriages, which is worth noting.
Except there are. Also, what does that have to do with anything? You just defended your association with a homophobic person, so why exactly should it matter if a different religious group also has a massive number of homophobes among their members? And this isn't even the only time Rubin mentions this. At one point, he starts talking about how LGBTQ people are treated in Muslim countries.
Let me ask you something.
Form
Let me
of
ask you
collective
something. Let me ask you
identity,
something.
right?
How many Muslim countries are there? How many Muslim
Okay, so you're
countries
just
are there?
pivoting?
No, I'm going to answer
But
your
wait,
question.
is Israel
How many-
collectivist?
How many Muslim countries are there?
I'm sure there are a lot of Muslim countries
You have
because
any
there are
idea?
there are a lot more Muslims than Jews.
Yeah, well, just ballpark. How many Muslim countries are there?
I would probably maybe say like let's say between 10 to 20 maybe.
All right, you're off by about 40. There's about 52 or 53
Okay.
Muslim countries.
Yeah.
In any of those countries, how's it going for minorities, women, gays, Christians, Jews?
That very much depends on the country, although I'm not going to act like there isn't a general trend towards bigotry and repression in Muslim-majority states. Asking what it's like in all of them pretends a monolith exists where there just simply isn't. The website 76 Crimes, for example, lists 33 Muslim-majority countries with anti-LGBT laws. However, Dave himself said there were over 50 Muslim-majority countries. So pretending as if Muslims as a whole are mindlessly anti-LGBT just isn't bared out by reality. On the same note, there's also this clip.
One of the first initiatives of Donald Trump in this current presidency, he put forth an executive order essentially attempting to ban gender-affirming healthcare for people under 19 years of age.
Yeah.
And when we say under 19 years of age, this also includes adults who are 18 years old, who are old enough to go off and die in a war for oil, imperialism in Israel, but they can't make their own healthcare decisions.
Okay, let's do this. I love how you guys have to get Israel into this thing. It's like Israel is the one place in the Middle East that you could go and you would be celebrated.
I couldn't get married there.
That's actually the truth. Well, yes, they are not perfect, and no country is, but you would be treated equally and with respect, and they have the biggest LGBT pride parade. It's coming up in 2 weeks. You should probably go. You might find it quite interesting.
Oh, you made a quip about Israel having an impact on U.S. foreign policy? Well, joke's on you, they also have LGBT equality. What does that have to do with anything? The entire quip was based around the United States engaging in foreign conflict to benefit Israel. The fact that Israel is also more progressive than other Middle Eastern nations is totally irrelevant. I also admittedly find it more than a little funny that the person who once said this...
Progressives used to say, I may disagree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. Not anymore. Banning speakers whose opinions you don't agree with from college campuses, that's not progressive. Prohibiting any words not approved of as politically correct, that's not progressive. Putting trigger warnings on books, movies, music, anything that might offend people, that's not progressive either. All of this has led me to believe that much of the left is no longer progressive, but regressive. This is one of the reasons I've spent so much time on my show talking about the regressive left.
Is defending a nation accused of engaging in a genocide on the basis that they at the very least support LGBT rights, as if that holds any worth in the conversation being had?
But what I have found consistently, Donald Trump was the first incoming first-time president that was for gay marriage.
I actually really want to talk about that.
Barack Obama was not for gay marriage when he first came in.
And not until
so
2013.
So what I would say is...
No, he wasn't. During the 2016 campaign, he directly said he wanted the Supreme Court to overturn the case which made same-sex marriage legal nationwide. Here's an article from that year discussing it. Donald Trump criticized the Supreme Court decision legalizing same-sex marriage and said he would strongly consider appointing judges inclined to overrule it if he is elected president. I don't like the way they ruled, Trump said on Fox News Sunday. I disagree with the Supreme Court from the standpoint that it should be a states' rights issue, and that's the way it should have been ruled on. I would have much preferred that they ruled at a state level and let the states make those rulings themselves.
Gay marriage is here. It's passed. It's a just
Then
cause.
why
I
are so
believe
many
in individual
wait,
rights.
wait, you're friends with Michael Knowles, right?
Yeah.
So what's that coalition again called? I think it's like Less Equal. That's trying to actually get rid of Obergefell and overturn gay marriage rights. Does that not concern you?
Well, first off, I've never heard of that specific organization. But what I can tell you,
you're friends with them.
Michael is part of. I just don't know what you're talking about. But what
you
I
can
would
look it up right
but
now.
what I would
it's
say
called
is
Less Than.
no.
And it's Lila Rose, Michael Knowles. I think it's what's that guy's name at the Daily Wire, the head one?
But okay, but that's not Donald Trump.
I understand that you want to go away from this.
No. That's not
topic.
Donald Trump. That's not the head of the party. I have friends. Well, first off, Michael and I are friends, but there is a cap on our friendship. There actually
How are you
is.
friends with someone who doesn't want you to be in love, my man?
He doesn't want me to be in love. He's had dinner at my house with his wife. My husband cooked for him.
That's against God.
Yeah.
So I want to have a word
But
with him.
no. But think about what you're saying. I
but
get
Dave,
it. No.
real quick.
Think about what I'm saying.
But what I want to say
your
is,
name.
I'm not coming after
Wait.
you.
Hold on, champ. You know, in your world of how tolerant you are showing me you are, you're actually showing a remarkable amount of intolerance because although I don't know the group that you're talking about, Michael Knowles as a human being has been to my house and my husband has cooked him lamb and we have enjoyed evenings together and shared personal moments and all of those things. Now, do we agree on absolutely everything? Of course, the answer to that is no. And if Michael or anyone else was trying to lead some organization that was going to go against my civil rights, well, that is where obviously we would have our difference of opinion, of course.
This person later clarified to Sam Seder the campaign he was thinking of is called Greater Than, which Michael Knowles is a member of. It's just so telling how Dave responds to this. Instead of arguing that he's fine with Knowles having that opinion for one reason or another, he instead just brings up how Michael Knowles is so nice to him and is such a great friend. Don't get me wrong, I'm not here to question Rubin's and Knowles' friendship. Instead, I'm just curious how exactly this holds any relevance to the overall conversation.
Dave, I
also respect people's religious beliefs. They're allowed to have their religious beliefs. Their religious beliefs are not allowed to legislate my life.
But Greater Than is trying to litigate how people live their lives. The entire argument they're making is this topic is too important to be left up to individual choice. Or, as they put it, children have a right to their mother and father. No adult has a right to a non-biologically related child. No child should lose their mother or father so an adult, gay, straight, single, or married, can create a baby. Their About Us page also says, restoring marriage to the child-protecting institution it was meant to be requires three things: a judicial and policy strategy that centers children's needs, changing public opinion so Americans understand the link between natural marriage and child protection, a church transformed into a child-centered fighting force. Greater Than exists to do all three. In a world that routinely asks children to bear the cost of adult choices, we have the audacity to insist on the opposite. Adults should sacrifice in matters of marriage and family, not children. We are committed to restoring laws and policies that place responsibility where it belongs, on the shoulders of adults, not the backs of children. The constant reference to policy should make it clear the intent is to change laws specifically so they'll get their way. People like this are trying to determine how you live your life, Dave. That's not even something they're hiding.
I'll just say real quick, like,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to come after you. I
Yeah.
believe that you should have the full liberty to have the family of your choice.
Yeah.
But what I will say is I'm glad Michael treats you with respect individually when you guys are together. But when he goes in front of his platform and says that a video of two gay men having a child is the most disgusting thing that he's ever seen, which is a quote, you can look up the tweet. Michael said that that child is in one of the most dangerous situations he can think of, which is crazy to think of all the abusive parents that actually live in this society, regardless of sexual orientation. And you're going to look at a happy family and say, this is disgusting. That should feel like a violation.
Okay, so I didn't see that video, but if what you're asking me is do I agree with, if let's just say what you said is true, do I agree with Michael's point on that? Of course the answer is no.
Well, I'd hope not. Otherwise, there'd be no reason for it to be brought up rhetorically in order to make the point you're aligning with people who disagree with core values you hold. The next person brought up also takes note of this very same topic, and Rubin's response to it is just bizarre.
I want to go to your prompt in a second, but I just wanted to address, so I actually come from a Christian background. I spent a lot of my career debating Christian nationalists. And even the nicest Christian nationalists, they do want to take your rights. I spend a lot of time talking to these people, even the really nice ones. So I just want to be careful, and I guess I want to say, like, I remember when you posted about having your kids on Twitter, which congratulations on your kids. The comments were horrifying. I don't know if you remember, but it was Christian nationalists and Republicans tearing you and your husband down for having a child.
Well, you should also note there was a lot of love. There was an awful lot of love from an awful lot of conservatives and liberals and people across the board and everything else. The way the internet operates is people only focus on the negative. So was there a whole bunch of nasty
Which
comments?
side did it
was there
come
a whole
from
bunch
more?
of nasty?
Do you guess? Let's be honest. Let's just be honest. Which side supports it more?
If you're asking me about for that specific post, it
Democrats
was
and
no.
liberals.
For that specific post, it was mostly people on the right, for sure. It was.
Who are attacking you?
Yeah, I
Of course.
fully acknowledge that.
Of course.
Absolutely. 99% of the hate that I get is from people that are in this circle.
Sure, but it's definitely not for being gay.
What?
It's,
no.
It's
Well,
for supporting.
no,
going back to the prompt.
No.
It's for supporting.
It's not for being gay, like
an
the act
authoritarian,
of gay.
desiring, probably demented old man. So
Rubin ends up admitting why this doesn't make any sense to bring up. It's not as if the other person is arguing that everybody loves him, except those in his circle. It's that those on the right support policies which lead to the oppression of people such as himself. What civil rights is he under the impression the left wants to take away from him? The person from earlier who began the conversation around Christian nationalism later once again talks to Rubin and makes note of his association with Tenet Media. I'll let that play out because it also does a good job explaining that controversy for those unaware. And also, I want to show just how little Rubin seems to really be able to respond to these accusations.
It's interesting to point to like 5 anecdotal examples as like an overall consensus on where the American people are moving.
Well, I think they qualify more as more than anecdotal in that Tulsi Gabbard was a Democrat member of Congress. Bobby Kennedy is a Kennedy, which is a standard bearer for Democrat
Do you think
policies.
Bobby Kennedy...
Not really. Don't get me wrong, the Kennedy family certainly has its power, but it's not as if it controls the DNC or anything. Nor does it even really set the agenda for the party. Ted Kennedy wasn't even able to get the nomination against Jimmy Carter in 1980, despite the fact Carter was by all means a very vulnerable political figure at that point. Joe Kennedy couldn't get the nomination for a Senate seat in Massachusetts in 2020. Despite that being the state the Kennedy family is from, and therefore the place where they have the most direct political influence.
He is also in alignment with most of his family. Would you say that they would concur that he's a representative of the Kennedy family?
I don't know about most. I know some don't like
most,
him.
Most don't like
some
him,
don't.
especially
Some
those
don't
that are
like
the
him
most
and some
vocal
do.
and still participate
Well,
in politics.
He's the
But
one
we can
that's
move
in the
from
midst
that.
of the
Talking about people like
political-
Joe Rogan, Bill Maher, these
Yeah.
are people that thrive off of clicks and popularity. What's more clickbaity than I left the left? So many people get that, not just because they're getting a whole new audience in order to capitulate to, but there's also like...
So you think Joe Rogan...
There's also like a lot of like...
hold on,
There's a lot of like oligarchic
I'll go.
money
Hold
too
on.
that like
That's quite
can
a claim.
incentivize people to
Wait,
change their worldview.
Wait. That's
like
quite, that's
Russian money.
Hold on. That's
like
quite,
for people
hold
like
on.
Tim Pool
Hold
or
on.
like what was the Rubin report?
Yeah.
Did that also
Yeah.
accept? Russian money from Tenet?
All right.
I'm going to be speeding through this next part as it's them discussing Joe Rogan and his change in values, along with the fact that dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party doesn't inherently mean people are going to the right. They could very well just be under the impression that Democrats have not improved their lives in any way, and as such, they are more attracted to Republican messaging about improving their lives because, from their perspective, the party in power is not doing a good job at exactly that. He even mentions that progressive ballot propositions do succeed even in Republican states, showing the problem is not the policies proposed by progressives, but something else entirely.
You want to talk about the Tenet thing? What do you want to talk about? Where do you want to go? I'll even
The
give it
Tenet
to
thing
you.
would be
I'll give it to
interesting.
you. Where do you want to go?
Yeah. Why did you take Russian money and pretend like you didn't know?
So I was reached out to by Lauren Chen, who you might know as what's her name, post-millennial online, or
she's
something.
like the Canadian white nationalist that's Asian.
Roaming millennial, and I've known her for about 10 years.
Okay.
And we were friendly over the years, and we had agreements and disagreements, and we were on each other's shows. And she contacted me a couple of years ago and said that she had some backers that she was talking to, and she was starting a new network, and they were talking to all sorts of people. She mentioned Tim Pool. She mentioned a whole bunch of creators that you guys know and I'm sure love. But it was people all over the political aisle. She said they wanted to create a free speech network. I said to her, listen, I am extremely, extremely busy, but I would consider doing something for you as long as I 100% control it. You have no control over the content whatsoever.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask for a ridiculous amount of money because I don't have time. And we'll see if we can come up with something.
So to come to your defense, I'm not going to attribute you. Like, let's say you didn't know that. And I'm not trying to say that you were able to know that it was Russian money.
Yeah.
But what I do think is interesting is that this anti-woke movement that just says woke a lot and calls it an ideology, it is so easy to be ideologically aligned that Russian propagandists are like, yes, these are our people. This is how we're going to get the American people on board. That's more of like the issue. It's not really your fault. It's more so that like your whole ideology is like, wokeness is bad.
What show did I do for Russia?
What
show did I do for Russia?
No, I'm not saying you did a show for Russia. I'm saying Russia saw you as a stooge who could easily say the talking points that benefited them.
But do you understand? They gave me no talking points. I did a show. It was a call-in show.
But here's what we're missing, Dave, right? I'm not saying Russia gave you a script to say. I'm saying Russia's like, yes, this is our guy. If we fund him more and we give him more influence, he's going to do it for us without even getting a script. Isn't that embarrassing?
No.
This goes on for a few more minutes, but Rubin never responds to the point being made, that even if Russia did not personally hand him a list of talking points he had to say for money, the fact that those in the Russian government felt investing in something he created was worthwhile does show that he has politics which would benefit the Russian government if enacted. Rubin has no interest in discussing that, however, and instead he just says over and over again that he was never forced to do anything pro-Russia. But again, that's not the accusation.
Do you think the Iranian regime before this war, the Iranian regime that has oppressed the people of Iran for 40 years, do you think that was a good regime? Would you say that was a good government? Would you like to live under those people? Were they progressive in any way? Do they hold any of the values that any of you guys hold?
No, but we don't just start wars on countries whose politics we disagree with or who are oppressive to their own people. We were actually an ally to Saudi Arabia, and Mohammed bin Salman ripped up.
That I agree with. You don't do that.
Okay,
we got something. All right, we got something. We got something we agree with.
That is.
If you couldn't tell by the fact check, Rubin was saying this while defending Trump's war in Iran. But that begs the question of why he would even bring this up if apparently he doesn't agree it should be a factor in deciding to invade other countries.
As for a few of the other things that you said there, again, if we could do you want to do the Iran thing again.
No, I said Donald Trump is violent.
Yeah, so Donald Trump is violent in what sense?
So I also want to mention the reason why you left the left, correct me if I'm wrong, is because you believe progressives were turning to authoritarianism. Am I correct there?
I mean,
that was your PragerU video. You said it. You can't deny it.
Settle down, Chip. There was a panoply of reasons that I did.
But that's one of them, correct?
Yeah.
Do you think it's authoritarian for the president of the United States to call for the death of 6 active members of the legislature for making a video that is totally fine and legal?
It's interesting. Oh, well, first off, you're talking about the video where they basically
Mark Kelly
and several of these guys were basically saying if you're in the military, you can go against Trump and all those things. Well, first off, there are some legal actual reasons that perhaps you should not, as a former member of the military, be telling.
Yeah, the punishment for making videos is death. I forgot. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Did anyone
hang him? George Washington would.
Did anyone get put to death?
It doesn't matter. The president of the United States is actively calling for the death of members of the legislature.
And is anyone in trouble? Is anyone in trouble because of that? You're missing the difference.
No, you're saying Donald Trump.
Okay,
hold on.
Hang on.
Let's just understand the prompt here. You said wokeism has done more damage than Donald Trump ever did.
So explain
Can you tell
the
me
damage.
a single time wokeism is doing something remotely similar?
So remotely similar as Donald
Trump
want damage? Being slightly sarcastic.
I can give you damage.
Let me explain.
Trump did later say that he wasn't calling for death, but was still under the impression this behavior was seditious. However, that's not what sarcasm is. At most, you could say he was being hyperbolic, but sarcasm usually refers to saying something you don't mean or that is facetious for the sake of humor. What exactly was supposed to be humorous about that?
I assume you've been to West Hollywood, right?
I have.
I used to live in West Hollywood, pretty close to the Abbey, and I left about I moved to the Valley before that, but I lived there for about 6 years. And the 6 years that I lived there, from about 2013 to 2019, it was pretty clean and it was pretty safe, and there weren't drug addicts and homeless people all over the place. I spent the last 2 days there in West Hollywood. That's the hotel I'm staying at is there. There are drug addicts and homeless people everywhere. Everywhere. You would acknowledge that is the case, yes?
I would acknowledge that, but
according to the Los Angeles Almanac, West Hollywood's homeless population during the year of 2025 was 79. Lower than it was in both 2019 and 2020. And remember, 2019 was one of the years Rubin specifically said West Hollywood was very clean and very safe, and there weren't homeless people and drug addicts everywhere, even though the city had a higher homelessness population than it currently does.
If you are going to create the conditions, the economic conditions or whatever you want to call it, that's going to allow for these people to be out on the streets, would you want to walk a baby in a carriage down that block as these people are there?
Well, apparently the place was safe when there were even more of them. You see how looking at data really bites Rubin's point in the ass?
Okay, but here's the thing. Republicans who are running to represent the city, including Spencer Pratt, is not coming in to build housing for all the issues that there is not enough housing in Los Angeles
but it's not a housing.
The number of people experiencing homelessness.
No.
Yes, it is, because on any given night...
It's not a housing issue. It's not a housing issue. You could give drug addicts all the beds and homes that there are, and it will not work. It will not work.
A study from 2005 did exactly this, providing housing to homeless drug abusers. And it found doing such actually did a pretty decent job at decreasing their risk of engaging in drug use. Specifically, it acknowledged that abstinence contingent housing, or housing you can only continue to be in if you remain free from drugs, had incredibly good results at making sure those in it, stayed off drugs. Although, even non-abstinence contingent housing, meaning they could stay in the housing even if they were caught using drugs, still reported better success at keeping the homeless population from engaging in drug use than just keeping them homeless. So, in other words, no, giving them houses does work, according to data.
Gavin Newsom, when he was mayor of San Francisco, had his, 10-year plan to end homelessness in San Francisco. I am sure I don't have to tell you about the drug and homelessness problem in San Francisco.
You don't, but what we don't actually have is...
The homeless population didn't start increasing in any sort of noticeable manner until after Newsom left. Before then, the overall sheltered and unsheltered homeless population rose slightly when Newsom was mayor. However, he very much managed to decrease the homeless street population.
I think there's been a certain theme that I disagree with a little bit of the premise there, but I can basically get on board what you said there. Look, if you want to create the conditions for economic success, what I think you have to do is you have to lower taxes literally for everybody, and you have to eliminate as much regulation as possible, right? When we see a massive exodus right now, we'll use New York as an example. Since Mamdani has taken over, they have lost trillions of dollars in tax revenue, right? So the guy wants to fund big government programs, and what he's saying is, I want to tax these people more, and then he is causing them to leave. That is what people are going to do in a free society, right?
According to New York City's comptroller report, the total amount of revenue that was generated in the fiscal year of 2025 was only $120 billion. How the fuck could Mamdani lose trillions when there wasn't even $1 trillion to lose?
You want
Can I tell you what I really want?
schools.
Can I tell you what I really want?
So might I recommend?
Schools have always been state
but
like,
has always been state run. And how do you think that's working out?
I think it was working out really great until we started gutting our funding. If we look at class sizes right now, can I talk about class sizes?
Sure.
My teacher, my mentor teacher, has class sizes of up to 40 students in her classes.
So I would
that is not
more...
sustainable. If we put more funding in, we can hire more teachers for those public schools to get class sizes down, which is the #1 thing.
So you
if
think,
we have lower class sizes, wait, let me finish.
You think
please.
if we just put more money into these things,
I think if we hire more
results.
teachers,
Yeah.
if we hire more teachers,
Yeah.
then we have lower class sizes.
It needs to be noted how Dave translated this person's very specific proposal into just spending more money on a program. No, obviously spending more money in the abstract isn't going to do anything. However, you do need to spend money if you want something to work a decent amount of the time. Or, to quote from an article on the website of the Learning Policy Institute, a large and growing body of evidence shows that money, when spent equitably and effectively on key school resources, improves student outcomes and closes achievement and opportunity gaps. Research consistently shows that when more money is spent on education, especially for students from low-income families, achievement and graduation rates improve, along with life outcomes such as employment and wages.
Now, did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No, I
Really?
know. No,
Interesting.
yeah, that's the truth. I know that he was not the president by the end of that, but I do know that in all the chaos of COVID and mail-in ballots and everything else, that somehow magically Joe Biden got something like 20 million more votes than Barack Obama. That's a little bit curious.
Yeah.
Is it curious that Donald Trump was only about 7 million votes behind Joe Biden in 2020, meaning he also got a lot more votes than Barack Obama ever did? Also, Obama's highest vote total was 69 million in 2008. Given Joe Biden won 81 million, that means he got 12 million more votes than Barack Obama did at his height, not 20 million. Even using the 2012 number of 65 million, that's still not a difference of 20 million.
Also, the COVID vaccines didn't work. I mean, that's a fact.
That is not a fact.
That is a fact.
That isn't.
If you got a COVID vaccine, could you get COVID? If you got a
yes,
COVID, yes,
yes,
yeah, oh,
but
you could. So it was,
the claim
could
was
you
never,
transmit it?
Yes,
Joe
the claim
Biden,
was never that transmission was at 0%.
Joe
That's not how
Biden,
that's
Joe
not how vaccines
Biden,
work.
Joe Biden. Hold on. Joe Biden. If you get the COVID vaccine, you will not get nor transmit COVID.
Okay,
that is what Joe Biden
but
said.
But that's not the
Anthony
claim.
Fauci
but
said that
not,
repeatedly.
That's not
yeah.
what the right claims about the COVID vaccine. Like, similar to yourself,
The right?
you said
breakthrough cases have also been documented regarding the measles vaccine, but it working is an established fact of medicine, so why would it have any relevance regarding COVID vaccines? Also, the success of a vaccine is not determined by if it meets the criteria of specific statements made by Joe Biden or Anthony Fauci. At most, you could use this as an argument for them hyperbolizing the benefits. And if you want to criticize them for that, then go ahead, but don't sit here and pretend like their standards are the same as the ones used by all major medical authorities when making statements as broad as these vaccines working. The CDC has an article going into this, but the requirements for a vaccine to be approved have nothing to do with it being absolutely perfect with no breakthrough cases whatsoever and no transmission among those who have the already non-existent breakthrough cases. Instead, it's related to its ability to develop an immune response from the person taking the vaccination.
We're talking about whether or not the right or the left accepts reality, correct? So the right claims that the COVID vaccine is unsafe and ineffective. Yeah. That's not true.
That is true.
No,
that is true.
Of the people who died from COVID, are the vast majority of them unvaccinated or vaccinated?
Hold on. Do you know
unvaccinated?
I
or vaccinated?
I know a young guy who's in his early 20s who never had any health. Wait. Who had never had any health problems. Young, healthy guy in his early 20s who had to get the COVID vaccine to go to college, and he now has myocarditis.
Okay.
Does that interest you at all? Does that interest you?
It
He
does.
had no reason.
It does.
He had no reason to get a vaccine
does.
that would stop him. It did not stop him from getting COVID, and he could still transmit COVID.
Notice how Rubin didn't even bother answering the question. Instead, he just pivoted into a personal story about somebody he knew that had health problems after getting the COVID vaccine. Well, I know multiple people who have had health problems after eating bread. What's your point?
We don't use anecdotes in science. This is let's pull it back to reality, right? This is why science is so important. This is why the left actually likes science, because we understand that anecdotes aren't a good tool to use when assessing scientific research.
So you think the government should have been allowed to force people to get a vaccine?
Okay,
that
so
was
now
rushed. That was rushed through by Operation Warp Speed, which was Donald Trump, a guy you don't seem to like very much.
Right? Yeah, sure. But we're pivoting.
Well, sure.
We're sure. I'm okay with Operation Warp Speed. I can.
So the guy that you seem to be quite deranged about, Donald Trump, pushes through a vaccine very fast, and you're
right
okay
because
with
I
that.
want to ensure that people are healthy. But
even though the vaccine
what I don't like is the fact that.
First off, if it worked is a different question from if it should have been mandated. There are tons of different medical treatments that do work, however, we don't mandate them. For example, if somebody has an infection, it's not as if there's a law demanding they take antibiotics. But that doesn't mean we as a society don't recognize antibiotics as a successful treatment. Also, the COVID vaccines did do things, for lack of a better word. We do have evidence that, even if they aren't perfect, the vaccines do reduce your risk of both catching COVID and spreading it to others. Somebody who gets them could still theoretically catch and transmit COVID, sure, but the odds of them doing such are much smaller than they would be if the same person had not gotten vaccinated. That's an important factor here.
We were sold. The bill of goods that they sold us was that you would not get nor transmit COVID. That is the president of the United States' words as he was forcing people to get that vaccine.
If he said
Biden's requirement was that you either get vaccinated or remain masked and submit to a weekly COVID test. There was never a requirement that people get vaccinated. An alternative was laid out for those that refused.
Speaking of presidents of the United States,
saying we should have been forced
how about
into...
Donald Trump in suggesting that people should drink bleach or do hydroxychloroquine? He's the president of the United States. Do you think that was at all?
All right, the bleach thing is a completely made-up farce. The bleach, he told people to inject bleach. Have you seen the whole quote? You think he told people to inject bleach?
He suggests.
The fact check on Jubilee did already discuss this somewhat, basically saying that no, Donald Trump did not use the exact words inject bleach, or drink bleach for that matter, but that was an understandable way to interpret his statement. However, I want to zero in on Rubin calling it a total farce, because even if you don't believe that's what Trump meant, it's not as if there wasn't reason to think that. Some More News had an episode breaking this whole incident down at the time, and here's the host of the show, Cody Johnston, discussing Trump's comment and the surrounding context, which very much made it sound like he was endorsing this method.
Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me.
There's the full clip, complete with context, that we will now quickly break down, because apparently that needs to be done. So the first part was Trump talking about how UV light can work as a disinfectant to viruses, a thing that is true. He then asked about whether or not you could inject UV light into the body, which, while sounding weird, isn't that outlandish either, and is a thing people are working on right now. So far, everything is squarely on the rails, or at least as much on the rails as we can ever hope these days. Then came the moment his breathy garbage maw primed the prickly little tongue inside and gooped out the following collection of words. And then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute. 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that? By injection inside, or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets in the lungs, and it does a tremendous number on the lungs. So it would be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me. And for the full context, his comments came immediately after DHS official Bill Bryan spoke specifically about how both bleach and isopropyl alcohol will get rid of the virus in minutes, meaning that he is very much referring to those chemicals. Again, all right there in the video and the White House transcript. That's, what he said. You can look it up. The context very clearly being that Trump heard about how it's possible to use UV light to internally treat coronavirus, and then heard that disinfectants like bleach also kill viruses, and then wondered aloud if you could also inject disinfectant the way you could inject the UV light.
Well, again, I think one of the consistent themes here is that we just have a fundamental difference on what makes an economy work. And what I think makes an economy
so what makes
work,
an economy
no,
work?
so what I think makes an economy work
Yes.
is lower taxes for everybody.
So did he lower taxes for everybody,
competition,
or did he actually
yeah.
increase taxes for the poor?
He didn't increase taxes for the poor. He
You
didn't
can actually
increase
go. You can
taxes for
actually
the
go
poor.
look at it. If you are poor,
Yeah.
after the Big Beautiful
What-
Act,
what-
you're actually
what
paying
do you
more
mean
in
by
taxes.
poor? What qualifies as poor?
You make under a certain amount.
Yeah, well, if you make under something like $50,000, you basically pay no taxes anyway.
Unless they live in an area with a state or local income tax or purchase one of the various products that is taxed in some way, either by the federal government, such as gasoline or alcohol, or their state has a sales tax.
You honestly believe that there is a moral equivalence to the tone and tenor of what goes on the right versus what goes on the left? Did Hassan Piker, who is the #1 influencer on the left, did he not just go on an interview? I'll give you two examples. He went on an interview a couple weeks ago and said that he understands why Luigi Mangione killed Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO. When you guys open up that Pandora's box, guess what? There's a lot of people that don't like your ideology. And once you can kind of excuse violence, it's coming every which way. And then it happened again. In the New York Times interview that he did 2 weeks ago, he said the same thing. Well, Donald Trump, a lot of people don't like Donald Trump, so I can kind of understand why people might kill him. Once you guys do that, once you go past that red line, it literally ends the fabric of what this country is, because we are allowed to have political disagreements. We have deep political disagreements. I would never tacitly endorse or pretend to condone someone if they tried to violently harm you or any of these people. But subtly on the left, that is being allowed. And that simply is not happening on the right. That simply is not happening.
Well, it would depend on what you mean by understand exactly, or more specifically, if you're just using it as a synonym for justification. Regarding Piker, a Hill segment talking about this specific comment made note that he never directly celebrated the actions of Mangione.
The response to Thompson's death led to heated debate across the country as some people defended Mangione and even celebrated him, although Piker himself didn't directly applaud Mangione. He did suggest the reaction showed just how many frustrated Americans are with the healthcare industry.
Because of the pervasive pain that the private healthcare system had created for the average American, I saw so many people immediately understand why this death had taken place. Even before they knew who the shooter was or what the motive was.
I also couldn't find anything to back up the idea that Hassan made a similar comment about one of Donald Trump's shooters. I'm not saying it didn't happen, just that I don't know of any evidence for it, and Rubin is not specific in what he's referring to at all. But it's obvious Piker, even if you find the comment abhorrent, isn't saying that murdering people is a justifiable response to the problems he's discussing. Instead, he's simply making the point that he can figure out why a disorganized civilization, in his view at least, would produce situations like this, which is a perfectly acceptable thing to discuss.
And there was so much social pressure over the last couple of years to trans kids. Abigail Schreier wrote an incredible book about this, that a certain amount of it is a social contagion. That is true.
I'll recommend Jangle Science Lad's older video on the topic of irreversible damage just for the sake of time, but long story short, Shire's work has been debunked by several people who have noted absolutely nonsensical aspects of the book Dave is citing.
So we can
trans people are disproportionately
Yeah.
unhoused, disproportionately
Yeah.
experience housing
Yeah.
discrimination,
Listen, but
healthcare discrimination.
Again, if you
while on
if
the
you
books,
told me, wait,
we
hold
are,
on.
are legal.
Hold on.
We are actually
Hold on.
experiencing discrimination
If you-
every single
okay,
day in every realm of society.
Yeah, you know, I've experienced discrimination. I'm going to guess almost everyone here in some way has something that they've been discriminated against or judged upon or something else. What you have in America is equality under the law, and you have an opportunity
We
to...
don't when Republicans are trying to legislate against us.
But tell me, so you as an adult, what law is stopping you from doing anything that another person cannot do, that literally anyone in this room cannot do?
See, this is the thing, is you were trying to hide behind this idea of the law.
No, but I mean that.
But the reality is laws are not protecting trans people. If they were, trans people would not be disproportionately unemployed, unhoused,
what would you like?
Healthcare
What would you
settings.
like the law to do for you? Again, the
I would
law
like the
can
law to-
the law can guarantee equality. It can't guarantee protection, right?
Dave, one of the entire purposes of having law is to protect people from others. For example, laws against murder protect the population from somebody unjustly killing them. My final thoughts are that this shows Rubin has no idea how to engage with other people on the topic of politics, and given he's a political commentator, that seems like it should be more than a little disqualifying. Good night, and good luck.